A lot of us are looking for ways to start our day feeling more joy and appreciation. And while some of us write gratitude lists or do yoga, others pour themselves a bowl of their favorite cereal, Honey Nut Cheerios. Because not only are Honey Nut Cheerios delicious, they can help lower cholesterol as part of a heart-healthy diet. So maybe the secret to a great mood all day is a little yoga, then writing your gratitude list over a bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios. Learn more about a heart-healthy lifestyle at Cheerios.com.
There are so many reasons not to skip breakfast. So many savory, mouth-watering, tasty, delicious beyond all belief reasons. Actually, that last one was pretty convincing. Stop by for a McDonald's breakfast. Mix and match a sausage biscuit, sausage McMuffin, sausage burrito, or hash browns, any two for just $2. Price and participation may vary, cannot be combined with combo meal.
And we get going, and the car starts overheating, and it's overheating and overheating and overheating. So to the point that, one time the guy opened up the boot, and I just heard this smashing of glass, and I'm like, what have we got that's glass?
Hey folks, hope you're doing well and having a good week. I'm your host, Mason Gravely. Today's episode, Throwback Thursday. If you're not familiar, on Thursdays we do episodes, old episodes we've had, and we re-release them if you haven't heard them, because we get a lot of new listeners that maybe haven't heard a lot of our older episodes, but they're awesome. And so this one is from 2019 with Sarah Davis, talking about paddling the Nile River. And just how she got into that, what came, how she came across this idea, or what inspired it, and how she went about pursuing it, and what it was actually like. It's crazy. She ran into a lot of things, and it's definitely an adventure, a huge adventure to say the least. But before we jump in, I wanted to read you an email that we got yesterday, and I haven't ever done this. We get these emails from time to time of people who have been inspired by the show. And I honestly was like, I was reading it to my wife, and she was like, why don't you just share that on the show? And I thought, I've actually never thought of that. So let me read it to you. I won't share any specific details of who this is for privacy issues, but I'll read it. Hello, Mason. I'm 25 years old, and I'm from a city in the Midwest. I won't share which one. I just finished episode 758, Why Adventure is Essential. It was such a great episode to hear just before I depart on my own adventure tomorrow. Tomorrow, August 25th, I fly to Frankfurt, Germany, and from there I plan to spend about 5 weeks riding my bicycle across Germany, France, and parts of Italy. I'm extremely excited, but also very anxious, especially with everything going on right now. This podcast really gave me some more conviction that I'm doing the right thing. To be totally honest, this podcast got me into the idea of bicycle touring when you had that young man on the show who described getting on his road bike and riding across the country, the U.S. that is, totally unprepared. By the way, that was actually episode 646. 19-year-old Jude Neller rode his bike across the U.S. It was like a $25 bicycle too, or $75 that he got from Goodwill. Super cool episode. Definitely check it out. But anyway, where was I? Made me realize I can do it too, so I am. This is my first real tour, and I'm excited to learn what it holds. Thanks for what you do, and maybe one day I'll be well-traveled enough to be a guest on the show. All the best, Pete. Oh my gosh, that is awesome. Pete, good luck on your adventure you just started. You're on your way maybe right now. Hope you hear the show, and I hope you're inspired to keep going. But, folks, we get these emails from time to time of folks who were inspired from a particular story in the show, decide to do either something similar to that, or, do the thing they've been wanting to do for very long. So if you're out there and you're on an adventure, we've heard folks that actually on the venture be inspired to keep going just because they feel like it's relatable, what the people on the show are going through, as well as, former guests have talked about being fans of the show for a while before actually coming on the show to tell their story. And they would listen to all these interviews of people who have gone through similar things around the world. So, it can be lonely out there on an adventure is what I'm saying. And so stuff like this just makes me realize that, we're doing the right thing. We're talking to people, getting the story out there, inspiring people to do things maybe they wouldn't have done otherwise. So if you're out there and the show has helped you in any way, I'd love to hear from you. And if you're out there on an adventure yourself right now, I just hope you're getting some enjoyment from the show. Know that there's an entire community of people cheering you on, rooting for your success. And, if you think you have some stories to tell, reach out. I'd love to hear them. But Pete, good luck with your adventure. And for anyone out there listening today, I hope Sarah's story of paddling the Nile River, the whole thing, I hope that inspires you. Let's get into it. We already, established you're coming from Sydney, and now is that where you grew up? Is that home for you?
No, I'm actually what I describe British-born Australian. So I was born in the UK and grew up there. Went to university in London and lived there for a long time. So that's kind of like my hometown. But then work brought me out to Australia. It was initially for 2 years, and that was 16 years ago.
Oh, wow. So you consider yourself a local now, huh?
Yeah, yes. Right. And I've become, I've got the dual nationality, which is great. And yeah, very, very much feel like a bit of a local. I love it here.
Wonderful. Now, with the big adventure that you did, it had to start somewhere. I imagine you just don't jump right into something like that. What's kind of your background with sports? Like, were you always kind of into it? Was that something you did as a kid?
Yeah, sport's always been a massive part of my life. And I have mum to thank for that. She got me trying so many different sports. Riding was probably horse riding was my first love. Did a lot of that, but then there were lessons in ice skating and squash and water skiing, windsurfing, swim squad. There was and then all the school sports. So I'm really grateful for that because that really set me up, I think, to just go and try different things and try different sports. And then I kind of got into running. So running was my main sport kind of through my 20s and 30s. But unfortunately, I found out I got osteoarthritis in my hip from falling off horses as a kid, some nutty horses. And then I blew my meniscus. So I started doing shorter sort of distance running, and then I blew my meniscus, and that was kind of like the last nail in the coffin as far as running was concerned. And I was gutted at the time. Like, running was such a big part of my life, and I probably let it define me a little bit. And I kind of knew at the time, it's like, they say, one door shuts and another one opens, and I just had to kind of sit with it. And I'd already started kayaking, or what we call here like surf ski paddling, through the Surf Lifesaving Club. It's part of the competition area, and I just started getting into that more, and then doing the long distance stuff. So then more of the ocean ski racing. I'm more of an endurance athlete, so it suited me as opposed to the surf stuff, which is a very short race. And just loved it. I live in a place where I get to go out at Bondi and in Sydney Harbour and train on the water. It's stunning, and that really was a big part of sort of the start of what then went on to be this journey and expedition.
Isn't it funny how life does that? You have one passion, and it sounds like, and we kind of only have so much time to pursue something. So you really fall in love with something, you really go after it, and then your body just says no more, and you're just forced. Yeah. You're forced to do something else. And thankfully, you were able to find water sports as a way to continue that, that love for endurance. And obviously that led to this big adventure of paddling the Nile. And I read somewhere that, the idea for this trip, I want to hear like where the idea came from. What stage of life were you in? You obviously were very active, athletic. You weren't doing big trips like this, from my understanding, if that's correct.
No, like all my trips were kind of, my holidays would be adventure type holidays. So whether it was trekking to Annapurna Base Camp, riding horses across the desert in Namibia, it was all very active but organized kind of holidays. Or I would, go there and with base camp, get a guide and a porter and off we went. But nothing, absolutely nothing like this. And I kind of got to a point. So I was working, the job I had, I loved. I was working for a bank here. So my background is I'm in risk management and project management within financial services, so international banking. So I was working at Macquarie Bank, loved the job, loved the role, loved the people I worked with, the whole environment. It was great, and I was doing all my sport and loving that and having these great holidays. And it was one New Year's morning, so I get up to watch the sunrise. My party days are kind of behind me now, so I got up to watch the sunrise at Bondi, and I've done a lot of the party. We've done that, yeah. And it was just, how you sort of start, it's like, what's this year going to hold? And then starting to ask those big kind of questions like, what's my purpose? What am I going to do with my life? And I just felt, everything's great, but I'm just not getting that sort of fulfillment and that sense of achievement and really getting to explore some more the things that I love and my capabilities. And it was, which is always really easy to do. It's like, okay, this isn't quite it, but what is? And, it's difficult to be what you can't see. And so started sort of exploring, okay, look, we need to, what is this going to be? And there were a few things that kind of helped. I read a book by Danielle Laporte, which is all about finding out how you want to feel and different aspects of your life, and then what makes you feel like that. So things that kind of came up for me was adventure, challenge, freedom, feeling strong, connected. So that kind of helped. And then what was really key is I saw a couple of people who'd done some expeditions, and what really struck me was, one, it wasn't in the kind of natural sports. So one woman was kayaking on a river, and another guy was prone board paddling. And the other thing was that they weren't your kind of classic explorers, adventurer kind of thing, the Bear Grylls type, or those ex-military who you feel have been doing this stuff since they were kids. They were kind of like ordinary people who just went for it. And so for me, it was like, oh my goodness, maybe that's something I could do that then. And it's like, great, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm a paddler. I want to do something paddling, and started to have a look at, something. So it's like, go large or go home. So I looked at, what hasn't been done. And so I looked at, people paddled around Australia. Yeah, a man and a woman have done that, or multiple. Then my geography is shocking, right? So I didn't know what the longest river in the world was. So I had to Google that. It came up with the Nile. And it's like, I love, so many of my holidays have been to Africa. I love it there. And found that, no woman had done a full expedition down the Nile paddling and led one. There've been women who've been on expeditions, but very, very different to what I was doing. And it was just like this ultimate light bulb moment. It was like, oh my goodness, this is it. This is what I want to do.
That's so there's not a list of things that haven't been done yet. It's a matter of researching, has anyone done this? And if no one has, it must be up for grabs.
Yeah. I mean, you also then go, there's probably a really good reason why. But, a little bit of arrogance that sort of comes in, and the ego kicks in. You go, yeah, I can do this, sure.
Well, put it to good work if you're going to have an ego. You know what I'm saying? And you did. But so it's okay. So you get the idea. That's one thing. But where do you go from there? Is it just a matter of Googling and getting more info? And how did you go about planning for this?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, there's no a wiki out there of how to organize an expedition.
Right.
All these expeditions are very different, unique, and they've all got their own challenges. So I began by reading some books and Googling. So there was a book by a chap called Hendry Coetzee, a South African guy who had led an expedition down the Nile from source to sea. And, was one of the first, was the first to do that. There'd been someone who kayaked, but it was different, a different sort of expedition. So I read his book, which was amazing, and that kind of helped me get a bit of an idea of sort of what was involved a little bit. And then I read a book by Levison Wood, who walked the Nile, first person to do that. And through that came up with the name of a chap called Pete Meredith, who has led a number of expeditions, organized, risk managed some incredible trips, is a whitewater kayaker, rafter. And so I reached out to him and contacted him, and we had a call, and that was really instrumental. Like, he gave me the kind of high level, okay, you've got to look at getting your approvals. This is what I would say it's going to take. This is what the different sections are like. This has got rapids in it. From here on, it's flat water. And just started to help me kind of pull out the sort of the top level, okay, the plan, really, the project plan and the to-do list, to then sort of drill into I could go away and drill into, okay, well, what are the approvals and who do I get them from? And what is all the equipment? And it took a long, long time to do. And he also recommended he said, look, it would have helped them in their expedition, because he was with Hendry on the trip down the Nile, and they'd had some challenges with authorities. He said, look, if we'd done a recce to Egypt and Sudan, it might have helped, particularly Egypt. So, and I just thought being a woman and doing it on my own, it may make more challenges. I wasn't sure. So
Yeah.
I did a trip to Sudan and Egypt and met with ministers of tourism, some other government officials, met embassy officials from the British and Australian embassies, and met with local paddlers, because I knew I was going to need people locally to help me. And I also really wanted to have local people with me. And then, it's working out what training is required, what are my skills gaps, and how do I go about filling those. So yeah, it was pretty extensive.
No kidding. How long was that process for you? Was it years or months?
Yeah, it was about a couple of years. I had this great idea that I was going to be able to do all of this, get it all organized in 6 months. And at the same time, I was training for this massive surf ski race in Hawaii and World Championships in Hong Kong. And I was like, yeah, I'm organized. I can totally get all of this done and train in the next 6 months. And that was just a tiny bit optimistic. So it was about, sort of 18 months later that actually I kind of, from officially announcing it, that I was then on my way to Africa. And I would cut my work down to 4 days a week, because I just having my 2 days at the weekend wasn't enough to do it. So yeah.
So yeah, you say you enjoy your career at this time, and I know there's a lot of people listening that kind of in the same boat. They love their job, they're having a good time at work, and things are going well, but they do want something more. Mm-hmm. How did you work that out with your work?
Well, actually, in this time I then changed jobs, and where I went to, like, they were great. They were very understanding, let me drop to the 4 days a week, and then at the end, I just made the call to actually quit when I went on the trip, rather than take a leave of absence. Part of it was I didn't want that safety net of it just making it that bit easier to go, oh, it's got hard. It's okay, I can just go back to work. If you haven't got that job to go back to, I just felt if things get really hard, maybe that would just help me go, well, it's not like I've got a job to go back to, Sarah. You've just got to suck it up and get on with it.
Nothing to do.
Yeah, so you're going to have to go and find a job. So maybe you can just paddle out a little bit further. And also, I wasn't sure what I'd want to do at the end of it. And I just felt it would be a bit harsh to ask them to sort of keep a job open for me to then potentially not go back. So, and it was pretty nerve-wracking in a way, kind of handing in my notice, going, right, that's it, and I'm unemployed. As I went to the airport, it's like, great, I'm unemployed, I'm homeless, and I'm about to go on this. And I was terrified, going off on this expedition. It was like, what am I doing? I must be insane.
That's a common theme we hear, I must be insane. And so, that's what you're feeling inside. What did the people around you say? Like some of your maybe friends or family, what did they think about the trip?
Look, everyone was really supportive. It was funny when I first spoke to Pete Meredith. He said, just don't listen to people who say it can't be done or you won't be able to do it. And no one did, which really surprised me. I'm like, oh, okay. And everyone was super, super supportive. I had fundraisers and did all sorts of things to help get it across the line. My mum at first was, before we'd really had a chance to talk about it, she was not happy, which I get. This just sounded incredibly dangerous, and and she sort of Googled and, you know, found some horror stories. But when we sat down and I explained to her, you know, why I was doing this, the why behind it and my approach as well, then she was really supportive. I mean, it was stressful for her, obviously. But what was really interesting was when I got back, I mean, everyone seemed genuinely surprised that I'd made it back. And they were like, yeah, we were really worried. We really didn't think you'd make it. And some friends were, yeah, we did think about doing a bit of an intervention. And I'm like, what?
I just didn't want to hurt your feelings.
No, they were kind of like, oh, okay, if this is what you want to do, but are you sure about this? But no one's kind of said anything at the time, which is good because I think, you know, I had enough self-doubt, and I think if people had started saying things like that, it would have made it that much harder.
Man, so despite the self-doubt, you really did feel this is something you just needed to do.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, every time I felt, is this crazy? Is this too much? Am I too scared? You know, blah, blah, blah. Then I'd sit and think, okay, well, how would I feel if I say now, okay, I'm not going ahead? And it was one of those, every cell in my body said, nah, you've got to do this. You've got to give it a shot. And it was just good sometimes just to go back and think about that. You know, I did this hostile environment awareness training. Obviously, you know, the places that I was going to was had that chance of being pretty hostile. And I sort of got drilled for a day, this great guy, and we're going through worst case constantly. You know, it's like stages of a kidnap, what would happen, and you're just focusing on worst case. And I sort of came out the end of that going, oh my God, this is nuts. What am I doing? Being told all this, like, you know, this is what would happen in a kidnap, and these are all the different types, and this is what could happen here, and this is what's going on in this country. And again, I just had to put that filter on it. It's like, okay, well, do I not go ahead or do I go ahead? How do I feel in both those scenarios? It's like, okay, yeah, no, I am going to go ahead, and I'm just going to do everything I can to de-risk this as much as I possibly can. You know, so that doing the risk management plan, and, you know, getting to use like the skills I've used in banking were completely applicable to what I was doing here. So that was also a big part of the planning.
So after running everything through that, you know, risk management, you know, process, whatever you do with work, what aspect of it were you legitimately concerned about the most looking forward to the trip?
There were a few, the animals. So the way I approached the risk management side was to go through and identify, you know, what are the main areas of risk. So it's the wildlife, the environment, so whether that's heat, the rapids, and so on. There's then illness and injury. There are potentially hostile situations, you know, from being robbed or, you know, worst case kidnapped, having issues with authorities. And then the final one is problems with key equipment. And then through that, just went through and identified, like, what are all the risks, you know, from the different types of illnesses and injuries, the animals that could threats from your hippos to your crocs, snakes, scorpions, etc. And then working out from that, okay, well, what's worst case, and how likely is that? And what can I do to reduce the risk? You know, if it's as far as illnesses are concerned, something like malaria, you know, worst case is you can die from it, but you take medication, you stop yourself getting bitten. So it's going through and working through all that process. And it helped in a lot of ways of get a bit of perspective on the fears, because I think your fears are kind of like you've got reality and then you put a whole bunch of assumptions over the top of it, which are not based on reality. And running through and doing this process helped to get a bit of a reality check on it. And then off the back of that, the things that really worried me were the hippos. We were going to be spending quite a lot of time going through hippo territory, and, you know, they're one of the most dangerous animals in Africa. They certainly kill, I think, more people. So the stats say the crocodiles, you've got the Nile crocs are big, like they can get up to, you know, like 4 or 5 meters. They are huge and aggressive. Then snakes, I just have a bit of a phobia about snakes. And the rapids, like you know, despite going out in the surf, I've had a near drowning experience. I get quite nervous in sort of big water, and I'd done this swift water rescue technician course, which was fantastic at learning, you know, how to manage situations. But what it did is made me realize how many more risks there were than I really knew about. So it almost made me more nervous and more aware of like, oh my goodness, there's strainers and sieves and this. And like, I didn't know about all that, and foot entrapments. So the big rapids I was really nervous about as well.
Sounds like you were just pretty nervous about this whole thing, to be honest.
There was just so much that could go wrong. And I did have to go into it going, the reality is, worst case could happen and I could die. And I had to, it's like, well, am I willing to accept that risk? And it's like, yes, I am willing to accept that risk in pursuit of this goal. And it was a very deliberate, yes, I'm aware of it, obviously didn't want that to happen, but yeah, there was that. And it was doing something I just had no experience in. And, I had all this new equipment and kit and I did feel incredibly, so far out of my comfort zone, I couldn't see it.
Then you get on a plane and fly to Africa and start. Yeah. And what was that like? And where did it officially start?
Well, I mean, even flying out to Africa, because one of the problems I'd had was getting the teams together, particularly for the first section. So we needed the raft, and I'd been talking to a chap called John Dahl who runs Nile River Explorers in Uganda. And I'd been there to do a recce there as well. That was before actually fully committing to the expedition. I'd already had a trip to Namibia, and I went up to Uganda and did some whitewater kayaking. So I just got to go and have a look at this and see, do I really want to do this before fully committing to it? And I came away from it going, yes, but I'm terrified. Anyway, John, who runs one of the rafting companies there, he'd sort of lined up and said, look, one of our guides is interested in joining the trip, but I had 2 other spots to fill. And I'd advertised. I tried so many through the network and people I've been speaking to try and find people to do it, and I couldn't find anyone. Part of it was because I couldn't say exactly when we were going to start and exactly how long it would take, and I still hadn't been able to get all the approvals in place. So, but I knew I wasn't going to be able to move things further forward from here in Australia, and I just had to give it a shot and go there and see if I could pull it off. And it's like, well, worst case, I just have a holiday there for a little while. So there was a big, it felt like a bit of a leap of faith getting there. So I got there, and luckily, long story short, things fell into place pretty quickly. So the chap Paolo, who he definitely confirmed he was on board, and it took him about a week to persuade a couple of of the rafting guides to join us. So chaps called Koa and Peter agreed to come along, and John very kindly lent us all the equipment. And then it's things like working out the food. So you've got, it's going to be 4 of us. I had to make sure we had enough food potentially for 3 weeks, because it wasn't clear whether we'd be able to get resupply points or how easy it would be to resupply. So kind of literally getting the spreadsheets out and going, okay, we need this many calories, and like, well, what food could we take that's going to have enough calories, doesn't take up much space, isn't going to go off. And I knew I was terrified of not having enough, because I'd end up with a mutiny on my hands if I did.
Right.
And then the other thing is trying to find stuff that you can also actually get in Uganda. You can't just go and buy a bunch of protein bars or protein powder. Try and find that. I did find some protein powder, but I had to go to the capital to get that. You don't have access to the same variety of things as I do here. So it was pretty challenging just doing that and stressing about it and trying to learn how to, use all the gear, and then how we were going to get there, and trying to get the Rwandan authorities on board. So it was it was pretty stressful. But then after, I think I've been there about 3 weeks, we set off to Rwanda, which was where the source that we were aiming for.
There's a lot of logistical things I wasn't thinking about. Yeah, food is challenging, because you can tell me wrong. I've been to Uganda a few times. That seems like it might be the most available for whatever you need, just maybe near Kampala or something around there. And it probably just gets more and more sparse the farther you go down the Nile. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all the way through Rwanda, Tanzania, and Uganda, we did hit some pretty remote areas, particularly Rwanda and Tanzania. Like there just aren't places to stop and get supplies.
What was that first day on the river like?
Oh, look, I mean, because it was an adventure just getting there.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, we've been talking about everything beforehand, and it sounds like, good Lord, I couldn't do that, much less get on the river itself.
Well, we had the actual getting from Uganda to Rwanda ended up just being an absolute nightmare, and I'd actually gone to see a fortune teller about a few months before I went. I don't know. I got to a point where I just want to hear some good news. And I was like, you go to these fortune tellers and they tell you good stuff, right? So I went to see this woman who was lovely, and she read my cards, and she kept coming up at the side of it. It's like, I'm seeing car trouble. I'm seeing the police getting involved. And she kept saying this. And I'm like, so for the next few months, every time I got in my car, I was so nervous. Like, okay, oh my God. She said, yeah, you better be careful driving. And I'm like, oh. And then one day, and I've been lucky. I haven't had a lot of, car problem accidents or anything. And I smashed my wing mirror, and I was like, oh, thank goodness. That's it.
That's all.
It's all okay. It's done. That's all it was. My wing mirror was damaged. The other car's wasn't. It's like, brilliant. Okay, awesome. No, apparently that wasn't it. So we got the first, it was like people carriers that we got. You load all the gear on, and we've got the raft and all the stuff and the food barrels inside, and all the electrical gear, and a kayak as well. And we get going, and the car starts overheating, and it's overheating and overheating and overheating. So to the point that, one time the guy opened up the boot, and I just heard this smashing of glass. And I'm like, what have we got that's glass? And I suddenly realized we'd taken this really special glue, like in case we got a hole in the raft and you need to patch it. So putting on some more sort of rafting material, and then you basically just stick it on. And I've been told how precious this glue was. It's a very special glue. Anyway, this smashes. So I'm like, oh my goodness, this is really not good. So then we swapped to another car. That was great. That got us to Kigali, which is the capital of Rwanda. We then we had a night there, swapped to another car, and we'd loaded up. And so the next day we were going to drive to the source. And that night then I'd gone to, at 4:00 the day before we were leaving to the source, I'd gone into the Rwandan authorities. They'd given me all the authorities and permits I needed. They were great, but talk about like lastminute.com. And I woke up on the day that we were going to be setting off, and I have a WhatsApp message from the driver going, "Oh, I've been arrested." What? You are kidding me. Luckily, I had a fixer in country, and she was on he'd arranges, and she never had any problems with this guy. She's like, he's always awesome. So then we all meet at the police station, and the person who'd arrested the guy had decided the best place for the keys was with him, but he'd finished his shift. So then we're spending hours waiting to get the keys. Anyway, eventually we get another driver and another car, and we set off, and we get to the point where we met some guides who took us into the Nwenge forest, which is where the Nwenge forest, which is where the source is. And it's still up for debate. Some people will say it's Uganda, some Burundi, some Rwanda. We picked what is sort of the popular choice at the moment, which is Rwanda. So we hiked in for 45 minutes, and we finally, and I'd seen the pictures of this green sign with the yellow writing on it signifying the source, and kind of in my vision board, I'd been imagining this for so long, and finally after 45 minutes I come around this corner, and there it was. And that was just such a huge sort of moment for me, and I got kind of pretty emotional. I mean, the actual source is really just a muddy pool. It's not that impressive, but it was obviously very significant for me. And then
that was just getting there.
Yeah, that was just getting there. So it's like, okay, right, I see the whole car problem thing now, and so we're really hoping that was all behind us. And then because we couldn't put in there, it was quite a long stretch before the river is then wide enough to actually be able to put the raft and everything in. So we were overnighting somewhere before then going to the put in, like we had to overnight because everything had sort of got delayed. And we're driving down this really little dirt road, and we get a flat tire. And so then the boys change the tire, and the jack doesn't work, and it takes ages. And then we put the new tire on, and we drive for a little bit, and that's flat as well. So then we have to turn around and go back. And we ended up having to stay somewhere else for the night. And then the next day we sort of go and overnight at this place. And then finally 27th of October, we made our way to the put-in, and it was funny, like on the way there, I was still pretty nervous, and it had been super cold. Where we were staying was pretty high up, and I was just worried about, well, how cold was it going to be? It was fine, as it turned out. Like, we dropped down the elevation, and it warmed up a bit. But then as soon as I saw the river, I was excited and I was happy. And, you know, it took us a little while to inflate the raft and load it up. And then we put it on the water, and, you know, 11:32, we took our first stroke on the water, and it was just the most amazing feeling. I was so happy. It's kind of like, for that moment, all the stresses went, and suddenly it was all worth it. And for me at that moment, even if it had just been a day on the river, for me it was enough. Like, to have got to that point, and people had said to me who've been involved in expeditions, and so just getting to the start will be huge, and a big achievement. And I really did feel that kind of sense of achievement, and I was, super, super happy. Just couldn't stop smiling.
Probably ended up being so much more work than you thought just to get there.
Yeah, massively. And I mean, but don't get me wrong, it probably sounds like it was already hard. I'd loved it, because I'd learned so much in that sort of 18 months to 2 years, and I got to talk to so many people. Like, people have contacted me out of the blue, you know, having heard about what I was doing and wanted to share some tips or advice, you know, building the website and the brand, and going on all these courses, you know, remote first aid, wilderness survival, Krav Maga, self-defense training, you know, all of that sort of side of things, and learning about the expeditions and learning about satellite phones and GPSs. You know, I love doing all that stuff. So the whole journey it had been amazing. Yes, it had been stressful at times, but it had been extraordinary. And suddenly this was the culmination of it. And there we were on the river. It was exciting. And we had loads of people around us. Like, they have, I can't remember whether it's the first or the last Saturday of every month in Rwanda. Everyone has to basically sort of do community service. So I think it's from 8 till 11. It's cleaning up the villages or the towns, or digging ditches, or helping build schools, and everyone stops and helps out, and they have to. It's the law, which is pretty cool. And they were all down at near where we started. So basically everyone kind of stopped, and they were just watching us. And when we got going, the kids just were all running along the river next to us and screaming and shouting, and it just added to it even more. And they must have run for like 10 kilometers. It was insane. And when, you know, they stopped, then some new kids would join and carry on with us. So it was, you know, it was a great atmosphere as well.
To know that you were the first person if you were going to complete it, the first woman to do it. And that just must have been just overwhelming. Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. Eating healthy and taking care of your body before and after adventures is obviously very important, but a lot of us are busy, so it can be hard to do. So that's why I recommend Green Chef, which is the first USDA certified organic meal kit company. Today, they have offices in 3 different states and deliver meal kits totally across the country. Everything you need is right in the box, delivered right to your front door with seasonal organic ingredients to make amazingly delicious dinners. It all comes pre-proportioned and ready to go, saves you time, and it's super easy to prepare. It's pretty much foolproof. They say if you can make toast, you can make their recipes. And they've got different plans for different tastes like paleo, vegan, and whatnot. And they work closely with farmers to supply responsibly grown organic ingredients. So Green Chef is also proud to be a carbon neutral company, so all their packaging is 100% reusable, recyclable, or compostable. And they also actively offset all the emissions they use. So if you'd like to find out more, go to greenchef.com and give it a shot.
A lot of us are looking for ways to start our day feeling more joy and appreciation. And while some of us write gratitude lists or do yoga, others pour themselves a bowl of their favorite cereal, Honey Nut Cheerios. Because not only are Honey Nut Cheerios delicious, they can help lower cholesterol as part of a heart-healthy diet. So maybe the secret to a great mood all day is a little yoga. Then writing your gratitude list over a bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios. Learn more about a heart-healthy lifestyle at Cheerios.com.
That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode.
It was. I mean, at that point, the whole first thing was it was less of the priority. You know, my why behind it had always been like the fulfillment and the achievement and challenging myself, and I was glad, you know, that got tested on the way. But yeah, to sort of be doing it was very special.
So I've been to Jinja, and
Oh yeah.
I've seen right there where Lake Victoria and the Nile, it continues down the Nile. And I'm going to be honest, there's some pretty serious rapids right there. And you probably faced that, you know, very early on. Was that something you were worried about, or something that you didn't give much thought to? Because to me, it looked scary as can be.
Well, it did. And as I said, the rapids really did scare me. And before we'd set off to the start, John had said, look, you know, go join one of our rafting trips. And so I did join one, you know, the ones that they do every day.
Yeah.
And the tourist trips. So I joined that. And I was really nervous because I'm like, if I don't enjoy this, there's a lot of this trip's going to be really unpleasant. Anyway, it was brilliant. I had so much fun because you get to run, you're sort of going over these drops and these grade 5 rapids, and it was just awesome. But that's obviously in a very protected environment where you've got safety kayakers all around you, and you know, it's something that they're doing every single day. Suddenly we're going on to this section of the river, which, you know, particularly through Rwanda and Tanzania, that very few people have done. I mean, luckily Pete Meredith and Hendry, they were the first people to run this particular section, and so being able to talk to Pete was great. But you just don't know exactly where the rapids are going to be and what's around the corner. And we did hit some big ones and had a very, very hairy experience one day.
So within the first, you know, maybe a few days or a couple weeks of the trip, did the Nile have how could you describe it to someone who's never seen it or never been there? Did it have a personality to it, or like a consistency to it, or was it always changing up on you day to day?
There were sections that were, because it's lots of different rivers that they call the whole Nile. So the main river we started on was the Nile. There were a couple of little rivers that led to it, and you know, this section was, most of the time it was relatively narrow. You know, you see the Nile through, like you'd have seen it at Jinja. It's, you know, I don't know, a couple of 100 meters wide. Suddenly here we're at less than 100 meters wide, and it's very brown. You know, it's got a lot of silt or mud in it, but it's really beautiful. Like you've got, you know, Rwanda, I think they call it the land of 1,000 hills, and it is this beautiful green lush. I loved Rwanda. It was stunning. So you've got these beautiful hills, and you're never that far. Although you feel like you're really remote, you're never that far from people. Like it's a pretty small country, and relatively densely populated. So you kind of always got local villages around you, and seeing people. To begin with, it was relatively slow moving. And then it starts, you know, sections. So it's not like full rapids all the way. You just have sections of rapids, and then it got slightly less silty. And once you get, you know, through Lake Victoria, suddenly it's clearer water. And yeah, it did really vary, really, really varied.
So what was once you got on the river, you know, you had just a plethora of challenges beforehand. What was one of the biggest hurdles early on in the expedition once you were out there kind of getting in the groove of day-to-day paddling?
Yeah, so it was great. We got into a really good rhythm pretty quickly. Basically, we'd get up, pack up, load up the raft, because everything has to be tied down. So we didn't take everything off at night. So we tie everything down, we get going. Maybe after an hour, I'd make our breakfast, which was oats, Nutella, peanut butter, scoop of protein powder, and just mix that up. And we'd maybe some sultanas or raisins, and we'd have that, you know. And then most of the time it was the boys on the oars. So you got a big set of oars, and then two of us up front paddling, and it was great. And then we'd get off the river probably about an hour before it was due to get dark, you know, to try and find somewhere to camp. And it was all wilderness camping, which was in just beautiful places. So it was all going pretty well. And then day 6, the river comes up sort of just past Chigali, and we woke up in the morning and I could hear a hippo going upstream, because they graze at night and then get back in the water and go and find their favorite spot to go and sit in the water all day. And it was just a bit sooner than I'd expected to get to Hippo Land. And, given they were one of my fears, it was just like, oh no, already, this is only day 6. So we got going that day, and, we'd all heard it. We all knew this is where we were. So we were all on lookout. We went far past the first group of hippos, and it was fine. And then there was another one, and we also got into crocodile territory. And I didn't really know what looked like a big crocodile, but the boys assured me some of the ones that we saw, that they were definitely in the category of big. So there was no more hanging our feet over the edge of the
right.
And then we came around this corner. So the Nile, it's very windy, and you can't see what's around the corner. And the normal approach when you're rafting in hippo territories, you kind of want to see where they are and then you avoid them. So you'd smack the water with a paddle, and generally they'll pop up from being underwater, and you can go, oh, okay, that's where the hippo is, and go around. But here, they were just so close. So we were going along, and on the left of us we saw this baby pop up, and we were then on the lookout, well, where's Mum? And it turned out she'd actually gone a little way away from baby, and we then drifted basically between her and the baby. And if there is one rule of dealing with hippos, it is do not get between a mother and a baby. So she lost it, right? She came at us, and Paolo was at the back of the time. He leapt to the front, and he just suddenly appeared next to us. And I didn't see it because I was just desperately we were trying to paddle away from her and get to the riverbank. But she put her head underneath and tried to flip the raft. But because, there's 4 of us on there, all the gear and everything, she couldn't. She stopped for a moment. So we were then paddling. And then she came again. And I just felt this tug. And I looked behind me, and she'd bitten into the back of the raft. So basically I looked behind, and there was this bloody great hippo attached to the back of the raft. And it's like, oh, this isn't good. Luckily, at that point, she let go, and I don't know whether it's maybe there would have been a lot of air suddenly coming out, and maybe that gave her a bit of a shock, or she turned around and realized that she was now even further away from her baby. So she sort of backed off. We were able to get to the riverbank and jump out, and she stopped. She went away a little bit. We were then able to unload the raft and take everything out and pull it out and start to do the repair. What was interesting, at the time, I think when you're in that real life or death situation, you kind of you're so focused on action, there isn't that real space to be afraid. But then having got off and realizing this was day 1 in hippo territory, we were going to come across a lot more. Getting back on the river, that was super, super scary. And I was really nervous. One of the boys was cool. He came up with a different idea. He said, look, because the river here is so narrow and so windy, if we see hippos again, and what we'll do is we'll stop, and assuming we can, we'll get off the river and tow the raft past, so that then if it does attack, we've just got something between us and we can run. And that worked well. Literally within the next couple of hours, we go around a corner, and we came across this big male hippo, and we got out and just stopped, held the raft, and he put on, I don't know hippo body language, but to me it looked like he really definitely wasn't very happy. He was opening and closing his jaws and snorting and jumping up and down and throwing his butt in the air and spreading shit with his tail. And we just stood there and waited until he kind of calmed down, and then we just very slowly let the raft past. And yeah, that was something we were to repeat a few times, but there were times when we couldn't get off the river. So it was, they definitely top the list of my least favorite animals by a mile.
Wow. They sound like bears, bears that we deal with here. If you see a mom and a cub, you stay away. You really stay away. And so unpredictable in a lot of ways, and so huge, honestly.
Yeah, exactly, and aggressive. Really
Yes,
aggressive.
and aggressive. With that going on, was that the only? I mean, I'm sure it isn't, but was that the only danger you were dealing with? Was there anything else that was that you guys were constantly on the lookout for?
I mean, we're looking out for Crocs was the other one. But they ended up being okay. Like there are sections further up in Uganda, in particular, where you get some very aggressive Crocs that will charge. But we were just always on the lookout for Crocs, for hippos. I'd said to the boys, if you see a snake, I only want to know about it if I'm in danger. Otherwise, do not tell me. I just don't need to see it and have nightmares. And I did ask them afterwards. I said, did you see snakes? They're like, yeah, we saw them, but it was okay. You weren't in danger. But it wasn't. We literally, so we'd had the hippo attack on day 6. Day 8, we got down to sort of the south of Rwanda, and it's where the Nile turns into the Akagera River, and it's right on the edge of this lake and right on the edge of the border with Burundi. And like a GPS doesn't have every single channel, and there were multiple channels, and I just wanted to check that we weren't, as we tried to get onto the Akagera, that we weren't going to go up a wrong channel and then have to like back paddle against the current. So I said, look, come on, let's ask some fishermen which way. And so some fishermen were helping, and then another 2 in their little dugout came over. But the guy at the front, he looked different. Like most of these fishermen, they're poor as church mice. They've got, clothes with holes in, and, they've got nothing. Whereas this guy's sitting at the front of this canoe. He had some camouflage shorts on and a kind of nicer jacket and schmick haircut. And I was just like, wow, he must be doing really well. And he's was being really helpful. He said, look, come this way, and effectively leading us over the unmarked border because it's across a lake. So he led us further into Burundi. And then he said, look, just wait here. I'm going to call my mates and they'll show you which way to go. So I was like, oh, okay. He only went and called the Burundian army on us, right? So this little teeny boat with an engine in the back comes across the lake to us, machine gun on the front of it, and 3 armed army guys. And they asked to see our passports, this, that, and the other. And we don't have visas for Burundi because there was no plan to go into Burundi. We shouldn't have been in there. And so they said, right, we want you to come across the lake for more questioning. So it takes us like half an hour to go across this lake because there's no water movement, and you're in a raft, which is not particularly what the nautical equivalent of aerodynamic is. So it was tough going. We did say to them, like, could you tow us? And they're like, no. That's not very friendly. And in the background, one of the things I'd done as part of the risk management is I engaged a company to send me intelligence reports every day. And I have someone who I was checking in with each day. So we had Charlie protocols to sort of run through how things were from sort of security, health, mental state, comms and supplies situation was, and there were code words and things to make sure, yes, I'm fine, I'm not under duress. And so as we were going across the lake, I surreptitiously on the GPS sent him a message, but in my sort of trying to do it really quickly, I hadn't used any of my code words. So they all went comm silent on me because they didn't know, was it me? Was I under duress? What was going on? Anyway, so we get across the lake and they question us, and I spoke to the sort of most senior person there from the army. He said, look, it should be fine. You'll be on your way soon, but the police just want to ask you a few questions. I was like, okay, fine. They decided that they wanted to check everything in our raft. So we literally had to unpack everything, and they were literally opening boxes of matches. So that took for ages, and I was getting really frustrated at this point and pissed off at it. I'm like, oh, come on, this is crazy. And then they said, right, deflate the raft. So then we have to deflate the raft. And then they said, right, we're taking you into Burundi for further questioning. It's a 2-hour drive. So we have to then load everything onto one of these police vans. And it was like something out of Apocalypse Now. So because you've got the army guys there, and then there's all these local villagers, right? And of course, they've never seen anything like this. This is like reality TV on steroids for them. So there would have been hundreds of them. They literally have to put a cord and a rope around. There's all these people watching this spectacle going on, and there's like white women and this strange craft that they were all on. So we pack up onto the police van, and so it's like a ute, and you've got the on the back like 2 seats back to back, benches sort of thing. We were sitting, two of us on each side, and then with a policeman on each corner with their old AK-47s pointing at our toes, and off we go careering through the Burundi countryside to where they were taking us. And after about half an hour, we stopped, and I just really wanted to get a message out to my intel guy, my crisis operator. So I said, and we did need to get changed. I said, look, we've got another hour and a half to go. It's getting dark. We're all in wet clothes. Can you let us get changed, please? Knowing that they'd have to put me in a room on my own. So they said, yep, that's fine. We were allowed to get changed. So I was sort of getting changed and trying to get messages out to my guy, Dave. And then we go back in the truck and we're going along, and someone, as we were leaving one of the villages, someone took a photo and they stopped the car, the police van, and reversed up, and they pulled this guy out of the crowd, because everywhere we went there was a crowd watching us, and they didn't get the right guy, but they thought he was the one who'd taken the photo, and they threw him to the ground and kicked him, and they kicked him so hard in the ribs I wouldn't be surprised if they broke one of them. And they do have a little bit of a history of being they have a knack of being quite violent at times, the authorities there and the police. So we get back in the truck and off we go, and after another hour and a half, we got to the police station, and they ask us more questions, and then they take our passports and phones, and I had all these messages on my phone with Dave, so I was quickly deleting all of that history because it would just look very suspicious with all these kind of like code words and stuff, and I didn't want them to know. But I still had the GPS on me, and then they said, right, we're taking you to a hotel. We're going to you're going to stay there for a while. So basically being put under house arrest, and we were given like a couple of minutes to grab our gear, and I was able to get the satellite phone as well. So I snuck that in, and off we went to a hotel. It was pretty basic, but it was lovely. It was run by these lovely nuns they were quite helpful. And that night we were, rooms, and I decided, okay, I'm going to take a chance. I know there's someone armed outside watching us, but I have to put a call in just to speak to Dave and see what the deal is, what he recommends from his side. So I snuck out onto the balcony under dark, and I don't know, it all felt very Mission Impossible.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds very Mission Impossible.
It was. And to be honest, people said, oh, were you scared? I was like, no, I found the whole thing in some ways I was getting frustrated and annoyed by it, but it was also quite exciting. And I think that's because I completely underestimated the seriousness of the situation. Right. And Dave said, look, there's conversations happening on this side. Just sit tight, go along with what they say, be compliant, which we were. And we were just like, we've done nothing wrong. We didn't do anything deliberately wrong, and just sort of believed in the goodness of humanity and common sense that would prevail, and we'd be on our way. Well, one thing that was quite funny, after we'd been interviewed by the police at the police station and came out, and the head prosecutor was there, and they'd asked us about our marital status and things like that, and this guy comes up to me and he says, I hear you're single and have no children. I said, yes. He said, that's shameful.
Oh my God.
And I was I just wanted to punch the bloke. I'm not going to do that. And I'm like, yes, whatever, fine. Just let us get somewhere to sleep and eat. I'm over this. So we were kept for a couple of days, and then they released us. So we were taken to the border. It was all pretty tense getting there, and finally we got across the border and was very happy. The moment I was taken into one of the rooms, because they wanted to hear the story and from the Rwandan side, but to one of the officers with the Rwandan eyes, and I just saw the Rwandan flag because I didn't know who he was or even which country. And I saw the Rwandan flag, and he said, like, sit down. He said, it's okay, you're safe. And it was just the tension just went. It's like, oh, thank goodness for that. And I did speak to, a few embassy officials, like from the British embassy, and every one of them I spoke to, the first things they said is, did they hurt you? Did they threaten you? Did they do anything? And I was like, no, they were friendly to us. But it was quite a little side trip.
No kidding. My goodness. So that's
let's say 8.
I was going to say, this all seems very early on in the trip. I mean, you start getting away from like the equator thing, the equator area, and it had to be a trip, like getting into more of the the desert side of the Nile, kind of where, as you got closer to Egypt. I mean, was that a tough transition for you, or did you really notice from the river itself?
Well, unfortunately, I had to give. So we got through. We then got back on the river, made it through Tanzania. We did run a rapid that we're still not quite sure how we survived that one. Then went across Lake Victoria, which sort of had its challenges, up through Uganda, and that ended up being a much more sort of cultural experience. That we ended up, one time we stayed in a chairman's house. So each village has what they call a chairman, who's he doesn't have the authority of the police, but is there to deal with minor issues and keep things going there, implement projects that the authorities want, and just sort of keep a bit of law and order. And you'd always go in and check in with the chairman, and we got to go and stay with the chairman one night. So it was this really amazing experience, and I'd really wanted to. I knew I wasn't going to be able to get all the way through South Sudan because it is quite a hostile situation there, and there is a lot of conflict going on internally. But I wanted to get to Juba anyway. The group behind me had said, look, the information we're getting is that the National Intelligence Security Service are going to detain you. They're suspicious about what you're doing. And the thing is that could have been an hour's discussion, but it could have been something that had gone on for weeks and months. And the consulate had made it very clear to me, like, if anything happens in South Sudan, they're very limited as to what they can do to help. So I made the call to skip South Sudan because it just creates a headache for a lot of people. It potentially makes it harder for the next person coming through. So it ended up being a sort of a jump. I then flew up to Sudan. So I didn't get that gradual transition, which I was really looking forward to. It was going from sort of a very much equatorial Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, straight into Sudan, and suddenly that real desert. You're in the Sahara then. So it was a bit of a jump.
Yeah, that's I hate you had to do that, but it seemed like, your risk management probably kicked in and said, yeah, this is probably a little too risky.
Exactly, and it was just like, no, you got to be smart, and like I said, the whole, it was still first in various ways, but the whole thing had been about, as I said, that fulfillment and sense of achievement, adventure, challenge, and it was delivering on all those things, and it was all for a long time it had been far more about, slightly corny as it sounds, it's the journey. It was about the trip. It was about the experience more than it was about that end goal of, okay, I've crossed the finish line and this is a first. So, it's somewhere I do want to go back there and do South Sudan at some point when things have settled down a little bit. But yeah, then I was suddenly, and it was a very interesting time to be in Sudan because there were a lot of protests happening and had been going on for about a month when I got there, as the people were trying to overthrow the government there that had been in power for the last 29, nearly 30 years. So they wanted to get rid of al-Bashir, and they wanted a democracy and civilian rule and so on. So it was a very interesting time to be there and get to speak to the people and find out why, what the situation was and how it had got so bad, and why they were literally risking their lives while they were protesting peacefully, and the Constitution says they're allowed to. There were protesters getting shot, and yeah, so it was an interesting time to be there. And it also kind of added to it is like, well, if they do overthrow, there was a risk of a potential civil war or certainly some very difficult situations. So it meant constantly having to have a bit of a plan of if I need to evacuate, if they're overthrown and if things get a bit hectic, working out, well, what's the evacuation plan if need be.
So much to consider on top of doing the actual, physically doing it. And that's just, it's just such a unique challenge there as well. Physically, what was the river like farther up for you? Was it a more enjoyable pace, or did it? I'm sure it was obviously a lot bigger. Was it less rapidy, maybe less danger?
Yeah, from a river perspective, suddenly now we were going from rafting to kayaking, and I was so looking forward to this. Being a kayaker, I was looking forward to that physical challenge of long days kayaking and doing that. And and it was, so it was very different. And we had pretty much headwinds all the way through Sudan. So despite the fact you've got a flowing river, you got the assistance that you get from that was really taken away by the wind, and it was very choppy at times. So it made it very, very hard going. And I did an initial section from Kosti, which is south of the capital Khartoum, up to Khartoum, which is about 230 k's, which was a really nice little warm up. And I had so the Sudanese Rowing and Canoe Federation were absolutely amazing. I'd met them previously when I went there. They made sure I had a paddler with me and some support. They helped with, giving me letters to give to the security services and the police and the military, spoke to them as needed. And, as a result of that, I got to do parts of the river that people very rarely do because I had the support. So the first section was a good warm up. Got through all the blisters, like my hands were painful, and the body was getting into the swing of things because obviously it had been literally. This was January. I'd left Sydney in September, and I hadn't done any kayaking, so it was an adjustment for the body. And then had a break in Khartoum for a little bit and got to do some fun stuff. I got to do it. They organised for me to do this like live TV interview and a few other bits and pieces. And they were a great group of guys that I was hanging out with, and then got going again. And then this was going to be the long push, like 1,500 k's up to the border with Egypt. And the first 10 days just hurt. The body just hurt all the time. But I knew, research I'd done and people who really push themselves to the extremes, and like you just have to push through it and the body will adapt. And it did. So, we'd be kayaking sort of 8-9 hours, I'd say 9 hours a day, paddle for a section, stop for about half an hour, paddle, stop for half an hour, and then finish for the day. And it was beautiful. Like, it was this really amazing experience. You're going through the world's biggest hot desert, and you're paddling through it on a river, and there were sections where you literally just got the desert coming all the way down to the river. And I've got this, always had this kind of fascination for the desert. It was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And these camping spots, you're just on these little sandy islands or on the edge of the river. There were some really beautiful places. You just stop, and we had for this section we had a support boat with us. Which was great, so it meant we didn't have to have all the supplies. Part of me really wanted to be self-sufficient, but then the reality was it was quite nice having the boat there, and we could just put all the supplies on the boat and just get going. So, it was. I loved it. But yeah, it was hard.
What a different experience. I mean, over 6,800 kilometers, you're gonna see so many variations of. I don't know. You just don't understand just how varied it is until you see it yourself, I'm sure. So where exactly was the finish line for you?
Well, that was up in Egypt. So then after Sudan, and one thing I just mentioned, like the people in Sudan were amazing. Like we could have been hosted every single night on the river. Seriously, we got hosted one night because I really wanted to experience it. And we were invited into these people's homes. They gave us beds. They fed us. I was taken. So they've got sort of little sort of 2-room blocks. So, one might be for cooking and other ones for sleeping and other ones for kind of hanging out. And I went with the women and sat and talked to them. And then they gave us coffee or tea and biscuits the next morning. The hospitality in Sudan is absolutely next level. And people just couldn't do enough to help us. They all wanted to talk and hear what I was doing and look after us. So it was amazing, absolutely amazing. And then went across into Egypt. I had a local paddler there, so then it was self-sufficient. The police there were with us all the way, so I had an escort whether I was on the water, off the water, and then basically the Nile finishes where it meets the Mediterranean Sea. Yeah, I couldn't actually go onto the like the day I got there, of course, there was headwinds, and it was massive surf, so I wasn't able to get out there, and I'd actually got I hadn't been sick all trip. I'd had a jigger, which is, or what they call these sand fleas, which are basically buries it. It's like a parasite in your skin living underneath it, and you have to dig these things out. So I had one of those in Uganda, which is pretty gross. And then I hadn't been sick at all. And literally what was supposed to be the last day, I woke up at like 1:30 in the morning, was super, super sick. I had some food poisoning and ended up having to go to hospital and get on an IV and get some liquids pumped into me to then split the last day in two. But it was pretty amazing. Like, as I got on that last day, I was really emotional in the morning. I was just so tired and so spent. And I think, when you can see the finish line practically, you're so close. All those sort of internal defenses that you build up and you keep yourself going. It was just, okay, we're so nearly there. And I just felt spent, utterly physically and emotionally, mentally spent. But when I saw the river that last day, the last time I was going to get on there, I just smiled. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful sunny day, and the river was literally just sparkling. So I paddled, and then gradually I could start to smell like the salty air. And then saw it, and then finally got to a point. I was like, okay, this is as close as I'm going to be able to get, and called it. And it was a pretty special moment.
So overall, did it fulfill that thing you felt you lacked when you first started planning the trip?
Definitely. And it took a while for that to really come out. You haven't really got that, or I certainly didn't have that real sort of perspective, objective about it and what I'd achieved and accomplished. I'd loved it, and I really felt this trip, I felt like I'd come alive, and it really did light me up. And then once I'd finished and kind of spent some time chilling out and started to write the book, just reliving it all, getting to relive it all and the experience and thinking about it, it totally delivered and delivered way more than I thought it was going to. I didn't have a lot of expectations going into it. Because I couldn't, I hadn't experienced anything like this. So it was, it delivered big time. It was extraordinary. And I was just, felt just so grateful to have been able to do it. Particularly when you see how so many people are living through those countries that I went through, and getting to go and do something like this, in the search for fulfillment and the kind of happiness. It's when people are just trying to survive from day to day. It sort of gives it all a better perspective, and so many people had helped me. Like, literally, there would have been hundreds of people before I left during the expedition that were, giving up their time and putting in effort to make my dreams come true and make them a reality. So, I came away feeling extraordinarily grateful for being able to do it.
Now, what do you think one of the biggest lessons that you learned from the experience was?
I think, there was a lot, like the value of actually, just keep going until you find the thing that really does make you come alive. Over the years, I've tried so many things, work-wise, business-wise, and when you hit it, it's worth it. And that having that big goal, it had given me a purpose for such a long time, and it kind of makes it easier to deal with the difficulties, I think, in some ways, when you know that, okay, right, we've hit an obstacle, but we're going to keep going because I'm so dedicated to this goal. So the value of having that kind of that big goal and that purpose and keeping going, I think that was one of the big takeaways. The value of slowing down, like you kind of had to slow down. And there was a lot of times I'd say, that you go, oh, this is Africa, TIA, and having to learn patience.
Right.
And just, appreciating the moment, when you take away all the phones, the constant phones and constantly being simulated and just being in that moment. I got a lot better at doing that and just enjoying it. I was worried that I'd get really bored and I couldn't deal with the monotony, but actually it was, when I adjusted, it was really nice. And it just, you come away with a warm, fuzzy feeling. You read the news every day and you can get very despondent, and there's that feeling of hopelessness, and suddenly you're just surrounded by kindness. And that's what I really felt through this trip. So it's like that kind of nice, warm, fuzzy feeling too. So there was a lot, and I'm still processing some of the lessons out of it. There's definitely more.
Yeah, the world is full of good people, no matter where you go. But you're not going to learn that if you don't go, because like you said, you're not going to hear it on the news. You're not going to hear it often on the radio. You're going to have to see for yourself if it really is bad as everyone's saying. And you always find out, everyone we talk to finds out it is the complete opposite.
Yeah. Totally.
You got home. It must have been just a trip, and then some time goes by. Are you just kind of fulfilled now and resting for a while, or is there anything on the horizon for you? Are you itching to do something else? Or I know one thing: when you're on an adventure, you got a lot of time to think about the next one.
Yeah, exactly. And so there was this, okay, what's next? Because I mean, going into this, the likelihood was it was going to be great, and it would be the start of what would hopefully be a lot more. So. And it was weird. I had a bit of time in the UK. Then I came back here to Australia for a month. Then I went back to Uganda for a month to write the book, or start to write a big chunk of it. And it was great. It's become a second home there, Ginger. And then I've come back here, and through that period, I decided, what I would like to do is try and do a source to sea descent on each continent. And so the next one I want to do, because I really want to do something here in Australia. So I'm going to do the Murray River, which is Australia's longest river. Hopefully going to do that right at the tail end of this year into next year. So that's the next focus. So I'm kind of doing some work, working to get some money, because obviously it was a bit of a one-way stream financially. So I did a bit of saving, finish the book, do some speaking gigs. I'm also working on helping getting some drowning prevention programs going in Uganda, like with some guys I met. So there's kind of lots on the go, but there will definitely be more expeditions, and also just rebuilding the body as well. It took an absolute pounding. So
I can only imagine.
There's a little bit of rebuilding happening.
Well, if you continue this trend of longest river on each continent, you're going to be busy for a while. That's quite a few episodes for us, so we'll have to stay in touch.
Yeah, there will be a few more. Whether it ends up being the longest, it'll be one of the major ones. So I know I've got some ideas what the next couple will be. So I'm super excited. Yeah, really, really excited about it all.
That's fantastic. That is awesome. Well, I know there was probably a million, change plans and things that went wrong and right, just from the little, honestly, the tiny speck of it we get to hear on this show. So, despite all that, congratulations on getting to the end of this journey and, doing everything you could to make it happen and pulling it off. I mean, despite it sounded like you were just totally scared to death before you left. So all of us can relate to that.
Yeah, and it's just that also reminder of when you go and do things like this, and you face your fears, you get out of your comfort zone. It's worth it. You get so much out of it.
You don't even know what you were missing before. You're like, how could I have ever thought that I shouldn't have done this? And now that you have, you're on the other side of that.
Exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
That is so cool. Well, congratulations once again, and
Thanks,
let us know when the book comes out. I'll plug it for sure, and. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, pleasure. No, I've enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
If you have a great day, I hope it's not too dreary out and you get a nice, restful day inside.
Thanks, Mason.
All right, Sarah, I'll talk to you later, and I'll let you know when it comes out.
Thanks so much.
All right,
okay,
bye. First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to this show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.
There are so many reasons not to skip breakfast. So many savory, mouth-watering, tasty, delicious beyond all belief reasons. Actually, that last one was pretty convincing. Stop by for a McDonald's breakfast. Mix and match a sausage biscuit, sausage McMuffin, sausage burrito, or hash browns, any two for just $2. Price and participation may vary, cannot be combined with combo meal.
There are a lot of choices when it comes to car shopping. Only Kelley Blue Book is your trusted resource for one-stop car shopping. Have confidence to price it, buy it, fix it, trade it, sell it, and love it when you KBB.com it. It's as easy to say as it is to use. Kelley Blue Book is the #1 most trusted third-party automotive site. So no matter what your it is, be empowered to nail it at KBB.com.